Hello, I'm a Merino sheep, and I have an interesting tale to tell you. I first came here to Ohio when there were hardly any settlers and there were still Indians around. I watched a town grow up in the wilderness, and I've even helped to start a school. Here's how it happened. My mother belonged to a man named Thomas Rotch, who lived 600 miles from here in Connecticut. Mr. Roach's wife had been very ill, but she was starting to get a little better.
I am so glad to see thee feeling better, my dear Charity.
I do feel better, Thomas, and I am sure the spring sunshine will do me good. It will soon be lambing time, won't it?
Yes, and if all goes well, we should have a number of new lambs this spring.
I have been thinking about that. Thomas, does thee remember that several years ago I told thee I would like to start a school for poor children?
Yes, I recall.
So often when I have been trying to help the poor, I have seen children who cannot read or write and who have no means of learning a trade to support themselves. I truly believe that giving them an education would be the best way to help them.
I agree with thee.
The difficulty is that I have no money of my own. But while I was ill this winter, an idea came to me. When the lambs are born this spring, if there are any twins, would thee give me one of each pair?
Why, of course I would, my dear Charity. But I do not understand how that would help thee to start a school. Even if all my ewes gave birth to twins, why, their sale would not bring in enough money.
It will be a beginning. I will trust to Providence for the rest.
That spring, 3 pairs of twin lambs were born, and I was one of the twins. We were marked as Mrs. Roach's lambs, but we were kept with the rest of the flock, and Arvine Wales, the Roach's farmhand, looked after us just like the rest. During the next year, we grew big and healthy, but Mrs. Rotch remained sickly.
Good morning, Mrs. Rotch. How are you today?
Fairly well, Arvine. How are my sheep?
Oh, they're fine. Look how big this fellow has grown.
Tell me truthfully, Dr. Todd, how is Charity?
I am worried about her. She cannot stand these severe winters here in Connecticut. I strongly urge you both to go south for the winter, or perhaps even to move there.
Charity, perhaps we should think about what Dr. Todd says.
No, they have slaves in the southern states. I do not think I could bear to live in a place where I constantly saw human beings held in slavery.
Think it over. Going south would benefit both of you. I will be frank. If you do not go, you may become a permanent invalid.
No, I would sooner give up my life than subject myself to living among slaveholders.
Very well. If your mind is made up. Good day.
Good day, Dr. Todd. Charity.
Yes, Thomas?
Lately I've heard much about the Ohio country. I am told the climate there is milder than it is here in Connecticut, and it's a free state. Slaveholding is not permitted there.
Ohio? But that's away across the mountains, and it's all wilderness.
Yes, but I've heard parts of the state are settling very rapidly. Many of our fellow Quakers are moving there from the south.
It would be so far away from all our loved ones.
Yes, I know. And we must consider carefully whether it would be right for us to make such a move.
What about the sheep?
Oh, we could take them with us. I understand that parts of the state have meadowland very good for raising sheep. Oh, I'm sure we could find some suitable land. The government still has a good deal of land for sale there. Well, Arvine, what does thee think about a move to Ohio?
Well, Mr. Roach, you and Mrs. Roach will have to decide that for yourselves. But I'll tell you this. It sounds like a good opportunity for a young man like me, and if you decide to go, I'll go along with you.
Good. If we go, we will need thee to see to the sheep.
It sounds to me as if we shall be moving to Ohio.
Mr. and Mrs. Roach did decide to move to Ohio, and Arvine was put in charge of getting the flock there. I was all excited about the journey, but some of the older sheep said it would be a hard trip. We would have to walk all the way, and it might be difficult sometimes to find grass and water for us. Some of us might even die on the way. I didn't listen, but they were right. The trip was even harder than they said. It was rainy and cold and muddy, and oh, the mountains, oh.
Well, we have almost reached the top of the mountain now, my dear, and the inn is just ahead.
The view is beautiful, but the road is a disgrace. So rocky and steep that the horses couldn't even pull the carriage up it. I cannot imagine how people can allow such a road to exist.
It is a poor road, and that's a fact, ma'am.
And the mud. Are the roads always so muddy when it rains?
Yes, ma'am. People are used to it. Why, they say if the mud doesn't reach the top of your boots when you're sitting on your horse, then it's a tolerable good road.
Well, at least we have reached the inn, and I'm told it's a good one, so we won't have to sleep 4 in a room and battle bedbugs as we did last night. And I hope we have better supper, too, and better pasture for our sheep.
Those your sheep? Be careful they don't get to eating the mountain laurel up here. It's poisonous for them.
Mr. Roach, something is wrong with the sheep. Some of them seem to be poisoned.
What did I tell you?
Yes, it is the mountain laurel. Here, there's still some leaves in his mouth. Arvine, keep the flock away from the bushes tonight, and find out where we can get some leather. We must make muzzles for all the sheep.
Muzzles? For all the sheep? All 400 of them? But Mr. Roach, we'd have to put the muzzles on every morning when we start out, and take them off every night when we stop.
Yes, I know, Arvine. But there's no other way we can keep the sheep safe from eating other poisonous plants as we travel.
Very well, Mr. Roach.
How I hated that muzzle. It seemed as if I always saw the nicest bit of grass when I had the muzzle on and couldn't eat. But it did save the rest of us sheep. Only 10 out of the 400 died during the 2 months that we were walking to Ohio. When we got to Ohio, it was already November. So Mr. Roach arranged for Mrs. Roach to stay with some friends for the winter, and for Arvine and half of the flock to stay near Steubenville. He took the rest of us to the land he had just bought. The trip there wasn't so bad after our journey across the mountains, but it was a hard winter for all of us after we got there, men as well as sheep.
What's up?
Oh, Sam, it's just you. I've been seeing some panther tracks around the sheep pen lately, and I was just checking to see if there were any fresh ones.
I've been watching those too, but I haven't seen any fresh ones for a couple of days. Maybe the critter's gone.
I hope so. I don't hanker to face Mr. Roach if we lose any more sheep to wolves or panthers.
Me either. Say, what about those Indian rumors? You think there's anything to them?
I don't know. Mr. Roach thinks they're nonsense, but I notice he's mighty careful about making sure that cabin is bolted up tight when nightfall comes.
Oh, that cabin won't be much protection if the Indians do attack.
I know. I'll be awful glad when we get a stronger cabin built. It's lonely out here in the woods with no settlements near. What's that?
It's just I, boys. It's just I.
Mr. Roach, we thought you were an Indian.
It's always wise to be cautious.
Mr. Roach, do you think there really might be Indians around?
I honestly don't know, Sam. But the best thing we can do is continue to be watchful, but keep on with our work. If there are Indians around, the new cabin we are building will afford us better protection from them.
It'll be more comfortable, too. This one's a mighty tight fit. Hardly room for all of us to spread our bedding out on the floor at night.
I know. That's why I decided to sling a hammock from the rafters for myself.
I don't think any of us could believe our eyes the first time we saw you clambering up that rope ladder to it. Wherever did you learn that, sir?
Oh, I learned that from some of the sailors on my father's whaling ships when I was just a lad. You never know when something you learn may be useful, but we mustn't stand here talking. I came out to see if the sheep are all safely in for the night.
Yes, they are, Mr. Roach. I've just checked them.
Good. Now it's starting to get dark, and it's time we were in for the night also. Uriah has a good rabbit stew waiting for us.
Yum.
Yum.
We all got through the winter safely, And in the spring, Mrs. Roach and Arvine and the rest of the sheep came to the farm. By that time, the new, larger cabin was finished. That spring, Mr. Roach planted crops, and he started a town which he named Kendall. In a few years, more people came to settle there, and soon there weren't any more wild animals or Indians. Instead, there were roads and houses and stores, a woolen mill, even a Quaker church. I thought that now things would be peaceful the way that they had been back home. But Mr. and Mrs. Roach just couldn't rest. They began helping escaped slaves who were trying to get to Canada, where they would be free. Helping them was against the law, so it was very dangerous.
It's almost time to shear the sheep, Mr. Roach.
Yes, and this year, the wool looks especially... What's that moving in the woods?
Some animal after our sheep, I'll be bound. I'll get my gun.
Don't shoot, Massa. Don't shoot. Is you Mr. Roach?
Yes, I am.
Praise the Lord. I've been so scared I wouldn't make it here. They told me you'd help me.
You're an escaped slave?
Yes, sir. And there's a slave catcher right after me.
Quick, Arvine, hide her in the spring house.
Yes, sir.
Charity, bring food and clothing quickly, please, and pack some provisions.
Another slave fleeing for liberty?
Yes, a woman with child.
Poor soul.
She's safely hidden in the spring house, and Mrs. Roach has gone to take care of her.
We must find someone to take them on to the next shelter tonight.
Matthew Macy will go. I'll ride over and tell him. Who's that coming?
Does Thomas Roach live here?
I am Thomas Roach. What does thee want?
I am on the trail of some escaped slaves, and I've tracked them here. It's a woman and child. Now I've heard tell you're in sympathy with these critters and think they ought to be free. But remind you, they ain't free yet in Ohio, even in Ohio. If you help them, you're breaking the law. If I catch them here, it'll go hard with you.
Does thee know a slave catcher by the name of DeCamp?
Why, yes, I am DeCamp.
I may soon have some business with thee.
Might be as I was mistaken about the woman being here. Good day to you, sir.
Oh, Thomas, I saw the whole thing. I was so frightened for thee.
The Lord will protect me while I am doing his work. Is the poor woman all right?
Yes, I have given her some food, and she is resting. But she is so frightened. It tears my heart to see the state these poor people are in when they come here. Sometimes I feel I cannot bear it.
My dear Charity, think of all those we have already helped to reach Canada and freedom. Now we must make preparation to help this one on her way.
Yes, of course, Thomas.
Mr. and Mrs. Roach kept on helping the slaves escape and working to make their town better. They built a fine new house at Spring Hill, too. Then, last fall, a terrible thing happened. Mr. Roach died suddenly. After that, Mrs. Roach just got more and more sick, and before long, she died too. I was sad for them, but more worried for myself. What would happen to the farm and the livestock? Who would want to buy me? I may have been valuable once, but I'm too old to be worth much now. But then yesterday, I heard Arvine talking to James.
So, you're going to buy the farm, Arvine?
Yes, 65 acres and the house. Somehow, I couldn't think of strangers living in the Roach's home.
What about the livestock?
I'll keep as much as I can. This old fellow here, I couldn't get rid of him. I've taken care of him all of his life. Besides, he's a pretty special sheep.
How's that?
Surely you've heard Mrs. Roach talk about the school for orphan children that she wanted to start someday?
Oh, yes, many times.
Well, way back when we were living in Connecticut, Mr. Roach gave her 3 lambs to start a fund for the school. This fellow is one of the 3. With the sale of the wool and so forth, the fund has really grown over the years.
Yes, go on.
Well, you know that Matthew Macy and I are executives of Mrs. Roach's will. She directed that we are to sell most of her possessions and put that money in the school fund, too. We calculate that altogether we have about $20,000 to start the school. And this old fellow here helped start it all off.
That was a surprise. I had forgotten all about the school fund. To think it has grown so much and that I helped to start it. I'm certainly proud. Just think, for years to come, young people will be helped to get an education, all because of Mr. and Mrs. Roach and me.